Welcome to the Achilles community, where men gather to master their physical and mental health. In this episode, I'm speaking with intuitive sound practitioner Sunseed. For the last 8 years, I've been attending sound baths facilitated by Sunseed, and he has profoundly changed my relationship to sound, from being just a sensory experience of hearing to a deeply intimate engagement with spirit. In our conversation, we discuss how his relationship with sound has evolved, the spiritual energetics of music, how he facilitates sound baths, his mission to use sound baths to support his community, and what it means to be a master gong practitioner. Our conversation is filled with deep wisdom for those open to it, and I'm honored to share our conversation with you. For anyone interested in attending a sound bath with Sunseed, you can follow him on Instagram at Sunseed77. Enjoy. Something that you gave me a while back that's really stuck with me is a completely different relationship to sound. I remember one of the first few times that we met, you gave me the example of listening to the subway as if you were like in a spaceship, like just fucking, just moving. And there was a bunch of other examples that you gave me that completely changed my relationship to sound, because I've realized that for myself, one of the points of resistance that I have to living in a place like New York City is the sound, like whether it's a screeching train or honking. And when you gave me that new perspective of like looking at it a little bit differently, it completely changed my relationship, what started as my relationship to sound, but then it also made me realize how malleable the relationship is between me and my senses, or at least how I'm perceiving my senses and how that can affect me. So I'm curious about your journey into that consciousness or awareness or perspective or relationship to sound, in terms of like how did it start and how did it get to where it is now for you?
I think I know I've always been into sounds. Since I was a child, I would make or mimic, replicate sounds of animals, of strange things, of bodily functions, beatbox, music that I would hear. And I was always pretty good at it. Enough that my friends would always ask me to make that sound or, and growing up, I studied music theory for a little bit in high school. And I ended up going to college for culinary arts. So when I did leave my senior year, I didn't have too much music training, none at all in a professional level, but I had went to a school for music, art, dance.
In your high school?
In my high school. It was a city art school, public school repertory company. And I transferred there from Park West, which was a culinary arts school, which I wasn't doing well in. That's the city art school was in the basement for a couple of years. And when they allowed me into that school, I started to, get more familiar with working with instruments and being around other individuals that were talented singing. And we actually had an audio visual class, which allowed us to go outside of the building and go to different studios. And we had a studio in the school, and we'd be able to do recordings. So between that and a family member that had an actual studio, I started, making my first tracks with house music predominantly. And I did some hip hop stuff too, but didn't get too far into it. Would have stuck with it, but my mother sent me to Johnson & Wales for culinary arts right after high school to get me out of the neighborhood. And so,
what neighborhood was that?
In Harlem. I grew up in Rangel houses, also known as colonial houses, the New York City projects, right next to Polo Grounds, and that had a lot of rappers come out of that area, and DJs, and music was always had a strong presence there, like particularly hip hop. A lot of it had a strong foundation there, with Rooftop being there and Rucker Park being there, and there were always these block parties where the music would be played. So that my sense toward hip hop was very strong, and I didn't come into uh, holistic sound until I was much older, but I think house music helped me also have kind of pulled me towards more meditative sound, and I was into that since the early 90s, I would say. And the sounds that came out of house music were more transient and freeing, and even though I didn't know it at the time, grounding. And then the vocals, a lot of spiritual intention goes into the words that are being used in house music. And I didn't realize that either when I was younger. Some of the songs that I listened to from back in the days now, and I'll think, oh, that was there all along, even though you couldn't appreciate what they were talking about fully. It was, I just wasn't mature enough to gain the full depth of the lyrics. And it's such a long story how it all leads to it in a sense. But
to that point, it sounds like the same thing we were talking about the Last Dragon.
Oh yeah. These things come from you're
From childhood,
magnetized towards things as a youngin that you can't see too far ahead, but these things are with you, and they make more sense. They come into full circle sometimes when you get older. And so the house music had the meditative aspect to it. When I was 32, around 2011, 2012, I had came across something known as a binaural beat, and it had integrated within it sequences of nature. It had aspects of meditative sounds that were intriguing, and those things pulled me into the sound a bit, like I hadn't really registered sound before, even though I always for a long time considered myself a deep listener, because it sounds from house music. That's like the stranger it was, the more I was into that. That's what I would look for, those abstract sounds that people would make into something rhythmic. And the sounds I were hearing were of a quality that were like so clean and sharp, and they stood out like if they peeled off the sound. One of the sounds that I had, well, I didn't know what I was hearing first. All I knew that it was called Bliss Coded Beats. And he was using Fibonacci. I say he, I know the guy's name is Marcus. I can't remember his last name, but he engineered, these tracks of bliss coded, meditative, sounds, tracks. And there was a grinding sound, like rails, like metal wheels meeting metal tracks kind of grinding. And for some reason that it sounded like it was encircling, right? So I don't know, it touched this thing here, right? Which I didn't know anything about at the time.
But
This
so did you
region.
feel it at the time?
I did feel it. I guess it was the first time I meditated. I didn't put effort into it, but it brought me there. There was like this stillness, yet this movement and like a perception of color or light or something strange that happened. And I found out on Facebook. Facebook's just started coming up with groups at the time, and that was like a whole world opening because now you got groups of people that are seekers going into these little chat rooms and feeding off of each other, or I'm getting these first, ideas of this, that, so many things that were outside of my box of confinement and belief. And someone had just happened to leave a link with the binary code, the bliss coded track. And so I just logged on and I said, oh, let me, check it
That's how
out.
you found it
That's how I found it the first time. And I ended up purchasing, I think it was like MP3 kind of purchase thing. And he had free samples, still has free samples. And those samples were there was so much happening in it. I keep going like this because it sounds like movement of spheres, right? And so I'm gonna jump to the next part because after that happened, shortly after, maybe a couple months later, I came across a Nepalese shop around the corner from where I worked. And I walked past it many times before. For whatever reason, I went in there this time. And the guy had all this Eastern paraphernalia and knickknacks and collectible things and garments. And he had singing bowls. And on the bottom row of things, so many things in there. And I had asked him about them, and he had showed me how to use it. And first he struck it, and that was nice. But then he rimmed it, and when he rimmed it with that wood mallet and against the metal, it sounded very similar to the rail sound that I had heard, the grinding, and I was like, holy smokes. I bought my first bowl.
Wow.
And it was a novelty bowl. It had the Buddha thing in the middle and all the insignia on it. And I still have the bowl. It doesn't work anymore. I think he got dropped or something. But I'm saving it I've heard of people taking mini singing bowls and melting them down and making gongs with them. So that's one day, maybe, who knows, I'll contribute to that. But that helped set me, I think, on the sound journey once I had that bowl and being able to feel the energy from it, that resonating connection. A little before that, another little store that I came across was called Namaste on 14th Street. And they had chimes in the window, and you can touch them and hear them. And the sound was so extensive that came from these little metal tubes. It was meditative, and I bought one. And then I bought two. This was around the same time. It still wasn't into sound practicing, didn't know it was such a thing. But I bought the chimes, I put them outside my door, and I would sit in front and read my books in front of, I live on the ground floor, and sit on a stoop. And the chimes, when they would go, it would just be like so perfect with the breeze in the springtime. And it was just so pleasant, it'd make you stop breathing sometimes and just listen. So I started discovering a relationship with like metal and the sound that it can produce and where it can take you. And maybe I don't even know if I was thinking of it as meditative yet at that time, but still, this is all in the same very small window, same year, around 2011 going into 2012. I also I used to sneak off from during my lunch break and go to this place called Quest Bookstore. And one of my clients had told me about this bookstore where they have all this, the spiritual paraphernalia, the crystals, the cards, the books, the pendulums, the incense. And this place has been around for over a century, right? It's actually connected to Madame Helen Blavatsky, who was one of the individuals responsible for bringing like Eastern philosophy to the West, to America. And she was one of the only females that had a presence among men, a world of men, dominating any such things. And she helped to set up the Theosophical Society, which Quest Bookstore resides on the ground floor of. And so, discovering that place, I found out they had Kundalini Yoga, all levels. And it was just like, I think, a 45-minute class or something. It might have been donation-based or $10. I can't recall exactly, but I started going there, and the lady, the teacher, the instructor had a gong that she would play during Shavasana. And that was the first time I heard the gong and felt it while in a state of relaxation. And of course, I thought that was amazing. That same year, Sandy had happened, and WBAI, which is Peace and Justice Radio, someone had recently put me onto that radio station, and it was a well of information for spirituality and holisticism, eating well and thinking well. And they were having a fundraiser benefit to help raise money because they got flooded out of their studio. And Integral Yoga they were hosting a sound bath at Integral Yoga on 13th Street. And that was the first time I heard the term sound bath. I was like, what the heck is a sound bath? They actually called it a gong bath. And I said, I remembered hearing the gong recently with my teacher, and then I'm hearing this gong bath. She didn't call it a gong bath though. And so I needed to find out more about this gong bath thing. And that's when it began to really change over. I attended my first gong bath, and there were maybe a dozen practitioners and 20 gongs at this thing. Big gongs, nice, gongs on top of gongs. And to hear them all together being played was so powerful. And where it took me, it was just profound. And I spent half of it allowing it to do so, and the other half watching. I just had to see how are these sounds being created. And I noticed they had all these, great colorful mallets, and they were applying them in ways that looked really cool, like rubbing them and streaking them across to create these weird otherworldly sounds. Some of them sounded like whales or, undescribable things. But I was so moved by that event that I followed up. I met someone at Namaste that shortly after that sound bath at Namaste, which is also the Novelty Spiritual Bookstore on 14th Street. And they were actually living at Integral Yoga as a resident. And they were practicing, cultivating their yoga. And they invited me to lunch there. Every day I think 5 days out of the week or so, they would make lunch there, and you can reserve a seating if you want. You can donate for the lunch. It was vegan. And I just started eating. I didn't even just start eating clean. That was one of the first times, to be honest. I had an all vegetarian meal with no meat and dairy or any of that. And it was delicious.
Was that also the introduction to that like way of life?
Absolutely.
Okay. And it sounds like that space was like both consciously and subconsciously opening you up to a different layer of living, or a different way of living.
Absolutely. It was like an oasis in a sense. Just walking in there, the smell, it has the Indian incense smell, which was different for me then. They have the market next door. They had the market next door, which was all organic produce and, all the healing medicines, all natural deodorants, toothpaste. Everything in there was natural. So I didn't know that existed, It wasn't like a Whole Foods back then that was around where you can get everything. Right.
And did you instantly feel allured to that way of living, whether not necessarily like super clean all the way into it, but in the same way that you were very subtly drawn to that metal sound, which eventually led you to the bowls? Do you feel like being introduced to it in that way slowly led you down the road where you are now?
It had to have. It must have. Everything was coming in that direction, moving in that direction, without effort, in a sense of like it wasn't contemplated. It just fell together. Like these things were leading from one to the next, like no coincidences type thing. The fact that I had just went to a sound bath at that place, and then to meet this gentleman, and he referred me back for lunch. Just a genuine individual, kind of like you, in a sense of like his. It was just I felt like I had some type of connection with him, just meeting him for the first time. I never went and had lunch with another male before, and it didn't seem like it was he was hitting on me or anything. He come back and have lunch with me at this place, and I said, oh my God, I was just there, just went to a sound bath. While I was there having lunch with him, I saw a posting for a training, Gong Yoga of Holistic Resonance, with the Grand Gong Master Don Conroe, who led that sound bath I had went to. I recalled seeing him there, and I don't think I spoke to him or anything. I did notice that there was a black man there playing the gongs, the only one. And I thought that was interesting to me. It was a brother, he had a little fro. And I was like, huh. I had never seen people playing the gongs anyway prior to that, other than doing goofy stuff on television or whatever. Right. Which is totally like a misrepresentation. And I ended up meeting him again, of course, that gentleman. He was in the class that I had took, the workshop that I ended up taking that January, after Sandy, which happened in the fall. And that workshop changed my life because it told me so many things. It told me I was on this path. A lot of the things I was just coming into, my intuition had gave me wind of it. And a lot of these things were mentioned in that class, which told me I was in accordance with something that was real. And this is all walking through the dark because I was coming into something new from what I thought was leaving something else behind that I was brought up with, that was implemented in me very, very deeply. But I wasn't practicing it, I wasn't active as in that religion, Jehovah's Witness religion. And probably because I wasn't, it gave me enough clout, since I wasn't so tethered or fastened to it, since my wife and I had broken off from it for over a decade, even though we still believed in it. Part of with that Facebook movement and those groups was hearing new information that questioned my foundation, what I thought was real, and that, which looking back, I feel like it's easily dismantled, but
yeah. And that kind of gets into the next thing that I wanted to kind of like go into was the relationship that you've experienced for yourself between your not just mental health, but because I feel like the term mental health can be very abstract, but your psychological landscape and your emotional landscape. How has your journey with music had influenced that, especially given your relationship growing up in Jehovah's Witness with that relationship to music, the complexity behind that, and also what you're tapping into now. What's that journey been like?
well, music and sound is I think I've become so much more sensitive to music in general now. A lot of what I could listen to growing up, I have a hard time listening to now. And I think some of that has been from the refinement of the sounds that I submerse myself in. A lot of it has to do with, I think, my heart being opened in the early stages of me coming into higher understanding and wisdom in this realm of spirituality that exists. And I think the relationship between, then and now it's a big difference. Negative music, definitely I feel it. If it's taken in, the lyrics, or even perhaps the dissonance of the style of music, how, like, an example, how hip hop has changed and the overall way that it's presented now, it's in a much darker, the music is darker.
Can you describe what you mean by that? Like,
Well, it sounds like it's almost theme music for a horror movie, or basically for a horror movie. It's just the drill sound it sounds dementedly darker, slower. It gives to me, impressions of, I always think of like, not that I think of suicidal thoughts, but it sounds depressively suicidal. Like it doesn't lift you, you know? It doesn't pick you up in a sense. It's very low music, vibratorily is low. And
How would you distinguish the low, more dark, negative that you're describing with grounding? How do you distinguish that for yourself?
For me, I think that grounding music can come in different forms, but it doesn't necessarily bring you into a dark space. You know, it can ground you and still lift you. Whereas some of the music that my daughter listens to, I think because she's come up in it, she doesn't see it as such. So it's a generational thing. And I know that the powers that be that broadcast change the hertz, if you will, right? And that 440 thing has a different pull, I think, on us energetically. The lyrics to it, they've remade a lot of songs in the last 10 years, but a lot slower. And I say to my daughter, how can you listen to this? It's so slow the way it's playing now. And it's like, you don't feel that? That's just, it makes me want to go sit somewhere and be depressed. I'm like, where's the happiness in it? And it goes right past her. Like, she doesn't see it, but it's just there for me.
Yeah.
You know? So, it's a tricky thing, you know. I think it's elusive. Because to be able to do that with music and it go right over your head is very dangerous.
Yeah.
You know.
So how would you teach somebody or get somebody to be aware of what you're speaking to right now? Because like when you made that comment to me about, you know, the changing the like perceiving the noises of being in a train as like being in a spaceship, for me, you kind of said it and it shifted something in me, but and I was able to kind of just start playing with that on my own. For somebody, whether like your daughter or just people generally who just are just listening to music and kind of taking it in without necessarily being aware of what's happening, how would you teach somebody or instruct somebody into that deeper relationship to music?
I think you got to be touched by it, you know, in a sense. I think you have to experience it at some level to know what it tastes like. Otherwise, you can describe it, but it's, you know, you don't know until you know what an orange tastes like. The color is there and maybe even the feeling, but until you feel the zing and the tingle and, you know, and then your nose sweat. Oranges make my nose sweat. I think that the experience is ultimate, and then, you know, through that you have a sense of it. Like, it would have been hard to describe, you know, putting yourself in that portal thing on a subway and a train unless you had a taste of it already, you know, to be able to perceive it in that way. as wonderful as the imagination is, I think sometimes you have to still be able to have had a taste to know. And because, once you experience a sound bath, it's hard to describe a sound bath in the way that I do it to someone. I do it all the time to my aquarium clients. All of them. I pitch it to them and I get the same reaction from most, like, and they change the subject. I'm like, if you only knew, I wouldn't be here cleaning your fish tank right now. Right. You'd have me over and you'd be laying on the floor, and they don't know. I pity them, Oh, this fish tank is so nice and it helps to relieve my stress. No, you need to let me, gong you. Then you'll see for sure, I think you got to know it a little bit.
Yeah, I remember whenever I try to, and like over the years that I've known you, like anytime that something's happened, like I'll invite a friend to try to get friends come through, because it really is a, I hate these like words like transcendental. Like I remember during one of the gong baths with you, I legit started feeling like I was flying through space. Like I started like seeing different like planets and things. Like it legitimately felt like you were just taking me through space. And the stress, so much of the, whether it's gong baths or just spirituality in general, or just like so much of it has gone down a very medicalized route of like doing this for stress relief.
Self-care.
Yeah, and there's tons of benefit to that, but I feel like we can get stuck in that one-dimensional perspective or approach to something. And something that I love about gong baths or just sound baths or just how you, or just really just the gong bath experience with yourself made me realize that there's more than just relaxation here, that there is actual journeying to be done in the soundscape. So for yourself, have you used your relationship to sound or instruments or playing music specifically for your mental health? And then also, has that journey brought you further beyond than just mental health?
Definitely. This has been life-changing for me because it has kept me grounded. I stay grounded most of the time because I'm dealing with, these tools, the Om engine, as I like to call the gong. And I got that from Don Conroe. These things they can move molecules, get them, going, arouse them. And it can take you to another place, even though you might be idle. You can traverse the cosmos in a sense, or visit a past life maybe. For some people. People go different places. For me, it keeps me grounded because I have to walk a certain walk, the walk that I talk, I have to demonstrate, in a sense, the potentials of what it is that this can do. And so I think I'm my own best subject. Even as I'm playing, as much focus as that takes, every time I'm finished, I feel like I'm coming down. It takes me sometimes I have to lie down before I pack my stuff up, because the come down is like, it's gradual, but sometimes it just hits, and I need to relax and really take it in. Is oftentimes once I get in my vehicle after I've fully packed and put everything in, it's like, whew, like I can reflect on it a little more and taking things. Usually after a session, I'll ask people if they like to describe or share their experience. And a lot of times people can't come up with the words. It's not till they get home and they can, sit in some quiet again and let the mind kind of re-register what it was. And some people can pick it up pretty quick and tell you, hey, I went to this place and this sound did this or that. The gratitude that I get from playing is so fulfilling. It's a high to hear the results that people share, or to witness it. People don't always have to see. I can, as an intuitive practitioner, my duty is to read their body language, pick up on what it is that they're coming in with, and get a sense of that and play in accordance to shift their mood, their energy, the weight that they may be coming in with. And going from person to person, when I'm in the field, as I like to call it, when the folks are lying down and I play over them, each person gets something different from me based on how I perceive, their presence.
And what is it that you're looking for or working with in those moments?
It varies. I wouldn't say I give favoritism, but I try to favor individuals that look like they need it. And it could be in their posture, their demeanor. It could be in their lack of enthusiasm. It could be in their enthusiasm. Their restlessness, their fidgeting. I look for scatterbrain activity. I look for eye movement with the eyes closed, and how they're breathing or not breathing. And sometimes I look for their body temperature. They're feeling cold, or if I'm close to them, I use my Reiki intuition to kind of guide me where I feel they might need the most, direction from the sound, a little extra. And then I apply it in different places. I try to apply it at the heart, try to apply it at their feet, sometimes in their sacral area or lower chakra area, a lot of times at the crown.
I'm curious about how your manhood or your identity as a man has played into your walk as a sound healer, whether just in general, and because one of the where my intention for the question is, on my walk through the past 10 years of through various like healing modalities and spiritual communities, and people that are just intentionally walking a path of healing, whether healing themselves or even not even really using that word healing. There aren't a lot of men there, and even in the conversations that I have with men, it's either dismissed or or made fun of as if it made me less of a man for pursuing a healing path or a holistic path or something like that. So I'm curious as to what your journey has been, both as a practitioner of this way of life as well as a facilitator.
It's been lonely. Sometimes it's not easy getting other men to participate in their own self-care, or to support your ambitions of self-care. And for me, I always have to refresh myself to keep on keeping on. Because if I based it on, the turnout of other men, it wouldn't be where it is, and I would be left behind for myself and for them. And for me, this it's predominantly females that show up to these wellness events, and I know there's a movement foretold from, in a spiritual sense, in a worldly sense. There's a ebb and flow that occurs in nature in the ages, from what I can understand. And I think we've come back into the feminine age of productivity, creativity, and I think maybe it's the feminine role that's going to help bring some type of reestablishing of balance. I think the age of engineering and industrialism and warmongering and so forth has brought us to where we are, and now we're teetering in a very shaky place. The environment, and just man doesn't learn lessons very easily, and we go against the grain. And I think that it has to be that feminine quality implemented into every facet of our establishment, which is otherwise it's not gonna, it can't be in accordance because it's not designed properly, That being said, thankfully, I think I have feminine qualities naturally as a Cancer. I think it's probably the most, I'm the most Cancerian first. And I think having the maternal paternal qualities allows me to get in touch with that aspect of receptiveness, and to be able to be in tune with, the feminine side, to appreciate those qualities and to see things as they are, to connect with people in a way that allows other people to be comfortable enough or open enough to allow me in, or for me to deliver what it is that I feel I'm supposed to be doing or sharing in regards to the sound. Once, it's hard getting them in the space, but once they're there, it's a wrap. Just come in. Just come in. I got you. We need it more than the women do. We need it. Most men can't get over their own egoism to see it, their own machismo to see it, or their own blockages to see it, you know. That's half the battle there, you know. And I like to ride the momentum of other men. Pause. But like, you know, what I mean is, if there's an initiative already in the process where you know, men are working on themselves, and man, jump on that and move with it, because it takes other men to lead other men. You know what I mean? Like, that is so instilled in us. It's like a block, many blocks. If you know, if there's a macho man, or a man that has the man presence, and other men can gravitate towards him, and he still has that soft enough quality that he can reason with them, and they believe in him, and it's not corny, and it's not, you know, I'll rock with him and coattail him so that I can find my way to these other individuals. And that's been a really, that part hasn't been easy yet. I haven't fully cultivated that naturalism to get them in yet. You know, I'm still working on it. Sometimes I feel like I have it, or I've established something, made contact with someone or a group, and then it doesn't reoccur. I can't really name it. I can't call it. You know, a month ago, I had maybe 5 men in my sound bath class, and I was so happy. There was more men than the women, or it was about the same. And they all had great things to say. They even left reviews on the website, and I did not see them the last 2 sound baths. Like, the momentum just stops. You know, it's not following up and bringing someone else. You know, so sometimes there's a lot of discouraging feelings, and I still keep pushing on. I know I have to. You know, this is New York City. There's so many things happening all at once, and we're all going through so much. I try not to take it personal. It becomes repetitive to remind myself, though, you know, especially as a sensitive person, you know, I have to always think of the mission and what it is that I'm doing, and other people that have done movements and had these dreams, and how, you know, they motivate me. Oh, it's a little utopian, you know. But you know, I think music touches everyone. It's the world's medicine. You don't have to say much. You don't have to be of the same creed or likeness or beliefs for it to give you what it gives you. And I know holistic sounds work, you know, to renew us or to give us that clarity. And I think the mission for me is to be able to have it's altered over the years, because I realized that some of it was just too big of a utopian dream. You can't save the hood with
Was that part of your intention, though? Like, specifically to where you're, like, where you come from, and like to bring it back, like to bring that healing into that space where you're from.
Yeah. I think that my people particularly, and when I say that, I mean people from the inner communities, the urban communities, I know they carry the most weight, and I know this is an outlet. I feel like if they knew about it and it was available, they'll be more prone to come to it. and seek it out and to renew themselves. But where do you go to get it, you know? It's easy for yogis to find it. It's easy for the conscious person to find it, to locate it. But where does, you know, the dude on the block, does he know where to get it? Is it in his community center? You know, how's it accessible?
That brings me to another question, was what about, and this, I mean, you can speak specifically to it in like the sound bath world and the sound healing world, but just in general, is there something about the holistic way of life or like the spiritual way of life, like this way of living, the medicine that you are trying to provide through music and through sound, and not just sound, but food and just movement and different things like that? Is there something about the landscape itself that is making itself inaccessible? Like, is there something about the health and wellness world or spiritual world that is inaccessible to men? Or specifically to the communities that you're speaking about?
I think it's accessible to them. I think there are blockages in the way. I think that there's ego in the way. I think there's peer pressure in the way. I think there is spiritual disconnects and religious hindrances that obstruct the full scope of what and who we are as spiritual beings, as this being the religion right here. This is the temple. This is the universe. You know, everything outside of this is out of your control. And for most of us, some people have longer reach, and that in itself is suspect because of how people have what they have, and it's slated in many cases. But I think that a lot of people have inherited certain conditioning and mindset, and I think that taboos play into it, and we limit ourselves with some of our teachings and upbringings. And when you can escape that, or escape the peer pressure, or mature into something new, adapt into something new, then you get new results and you find a different tangibility. And the holistic aspects of our existence is not commonplace in society. You know, now it's becoming more accessible and more trendy, and this is making it more available to people because it's becoming a little more mainstreamed, or, you know, word of mouth. You hear from the next person, hey, you know, you really need to try this. And maybe they were of that religious relationship, and because they've given you a little clearance, you know, you might put your toe in it a little bit. You know, we have so many shackles that we're up against, and I think some are harder to get off than others, and you gotta kind of work your way down to, you know, what's in you. There's a lot of fear that I think keeps us away from learning deeper aspects of ourselves, or reaching into our own spiritualism. And I know that's different for different people, but there is a underlying thing there that can be built upon, which most religions are really about, but it's encoded. You know, the Bible is all really about this here. But you have to know how to, you know, decipher it to really see it for what it is, you know, the whole Christ consciousness thing to the seven candles and Jacob's ladder and so many different, you know, analogies, and you just have it's mysticism. And I think coming into your own is mysticism too. You know, for me to get in touch with who I am, I had to go to Quest Bookstore, and that place is built upon you are the shrine in your own, and you have to disassemble things, take it apart, go into the dark to see the light, and come out, you know, renewed and forge yourself in the fire of your own coming.
What's something that motivates you through that, you know, given that, and I know that for myself as well, like the obstacle or the most challenging part of the process is moving through the fear or overcoming the fear, you know, going into the darkness to be able to come out the other side. What motivates you through that cycle?
The mission motivates me. The fact that the universe keeps giving me the tools, like, here you go, you know, keep going. Every time I think I'm gonna wean off a little, a new opportunity presents itself, or I just know that this is what I'm supposed to do, you know. I've made some pacts with the universe too. You know, I have my son, he's 6 now, and part of there's some deals that I made with the universe. If you give me a son, I'm all yours, you know. And it's gonna be a long, long walk, but somebody has to do it, and I realize if I keep with it, you know, I'll be someone's baba at some point. I'll have a new name initiated. Yeah. You know, I won't be Sunseed anymore, which is a name I gave myself. That's my own coming. I felt like I came into something new and had to be able to describe myself through something other than Tony Ray Palmer Jr. or TJ, you know.
I'm really curious and inspired by this relationship between healing and spirituality. For one, I'm just obsessed with that, you know, as a concept and as a practice, you know, just healing and spirituality. Tangentially, or the context in which that I'm most fascinated by those things is, on one hand, the culture and environment of just where we are right now in the United States and everything like that it's hyper medicalized. And also the fact that men aren't participating in it, but at the same time we are in a different way. You know, the fact that like most doctors are men, or when you were talking about the Eastern traditions, that mostly men brought it over because they were the scholars, they were the ones in the schools, they were the ones studying. So in one sense, like we were the ones in power or in control systematically, but we're not the ones participating or practicing And obviously, like there are different levels and dimensions to it that I'm speaking to, but it just fascinates me that I got into this like 10 years ago, and it just blew my mind that there is a way to make life a little bit easier for myself and everybody else by healing, whether it's traumas or wounds or pain or whatever else it is. But when I started going down the path of going to workshops and finding different communities and things like that, there was only women, and then racially in the yoga studios, mostly white people. And then when in communities that I would find just like through Instagram or friends of mine, like Harriet's Apothecary and different things like that, they were all people of color. So then even racially, there's segregation within the healing community, or separation within the healing spirituality community. And then also through gender, there's also separation in that. And obviously, like there are historical systemic reasons for those separations. What fascinates me the most is, and as utopian as it sounds, how do we come together for the sake of healing? How can we be brought together for the sake of healing? And that's something that fascinated me and has attracted to me to Gillian, to you, and just to just spaces where I felt almost like those things didn't matter, even though they do.
There's multiple ways of getting to the answer.
A lot of what's behind the mission of the Achilles community is something that I don't even know yet. The overarching mission is for me to get men together to just have these conversations. Just getting men together to just talk about, what, like, just to talk, just like it's not even about these deeper things. Is like you're saying, like, we need it, but we're not going after it, and there's that juxtaposition. Like, it took me a long time to just even recognize that I was in pain, or that I even felt pain in an emotional way. And that really started putting me down the path of like taking this work a little bit more seriously and asking deeper questions.
Men's groups are needed.
When I started working primarily with the Noble Touch with Jeff in terms of energy healing and things like that, it almost feels like I've been trying to figure out a way of like defeminizing healing to make it more palatable for men. That's why like I had to specifically start saying like this is for men to even start paying attention. Do you see anything in terms of how you walk, or just like the services or sound healing? Do you see ways of framing this way of life that makes it more palatable and attractive to men?
I'm working on that, I was thinking of, I think for some men that yoga could be, has a feminine connotation to it. You're doing these stretches that some of them are vulnerable looking. They don't look masculine to do some of these asanas and poses. And I think, of course, yoga is totally about giving back to the self and cultivating it into the oneness aspects of everything. And so it's utterly beneficial, right? But what's similar to yoga that is but isn't is stretching. Stretching is cool, right? You can stretch and still be masculine, and we all need the damn stretch, right? It's something that's pivotal in our conditioning, just to sit, stand, basic things. One way I've been thinking of presenting it is just as a stretch exercise or something. Very short, expansive time given to stretching. Nothing crazy, head, shoulders, knees, and toes type thing. Just to get movement going in the body. Sound bath is, I don't feel the sound bath is feminine, but there is a vulnerability.
Even the word bath for guys, it's like, I don't take a bath.
Yeah. I just do pits.
You're right, yeah.
Ain't no face. That's a good point. So maybe rewording that, but to incorporate, to still get them to the stretch and to the sound aspect, you know. And I think you gotta cut to the chase, not too much of the woo-woo talk that's very basic, you know. Maybe add the word strength to it. You know, it's tricky. We gotta dupe ourselves into becoming better at reaching ourselves. But there definitely is an approach there that needs to be implemented, I think, for it to really register. And it's a shame, but it is definitely what it is.
It's beaten out of us to be sensitive to, and I think it also goes a lot back to what you're saying about like your daughter not being sensitive to the physicality, and I think for a lot of men it's that same way that we were desensitized to a lot of it. Like even I remember when I was saying before, like I was in a men's group maybe like a year ago with a friend of mine, and he described his emotional experience as painful. And it was the first time that it clicked in my brain of like, because like growing up in martial arts, like I've experienced physical pain. Like I can admit like when I'm physically in pain, but it just kind of clicked for me that I can also be in emotional pain. And it was a huge moment of me realizing how desensitized I was and how brainwashed I was, like as a man, you know, and no one ever explicitly told me like as a man you can't feel pain, but through life it just slipped away, this awareness that I was in pain. And it wasn't until I started having these conversations that it came through.
Because you probably weren't permitted to have an understanding or relationship to recognize it. You know, it gets put way back there, out of reach. Like you can't be that way because you're a man. You don't do that. I feel like there's a turning in society where they're trying to regard a more versatile, you know, the qualities of men, and it's not just that, and it's okay to be like this and not disregarded, or, you know, I think we're approaching that. There's still, you know, it's a long way to go, I feel. The other part is, how do you do that without, you know, feminizing the man? That's a big thing now, that there's an agenda to defeminize, make men more feminine in a sense. I think I do believe that is occurring. I think Hollywood is full of trickery, but at the same time, there's like two movements going at once, which makes it even harder to, see through, because it's easy to tack one onto the other when it's not the case. It's two different. They aren't even really parallels. One is a demonic essence, and then the other one is, natural. And I think that agenda to make men less masculine, especially in certain cultures, I think particularly black men, I think that's a power structure thing to hinder, a race. I mean, we're in a race, but it's like a race. That aspect of it is a race because, you're trying to keep someone from reaching their potential of getting, the masculine black man of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It doesn't look that way anymore. Just in the music alone, it's so obvious, and how groups are presented and what we sound like, and
What's the relationship that you see between what you're describing now and what you mentioned earlier, in terms of like there's a spiritual ebb and flow, that of like a natural kind of ebb and flow that happens, and like from the conversation we were having about men going into the healing community, and that like that has a lot to do with the rise of the feminine energy into a place of power. How do you see that, or I guess what is the relationship that you see between that and the more manipulative, demonic sense of it that you're describing?
I think the establishment, I know the establishment is well aware of the forces of nature and the ebb and flow of the ages. And I think they know that their time is dwindling, and they gotta throw the full gambit in, all their resources at this present last days and times, as their last days and times. And I think because things come full circle, that change is gonna come. I think the consciousness of the cosmos will prevail, and what's happening has to happen so that what's to come can happen, and I think we have to be brought down to be rebuilt in a sense, trip over our own faults. And the faults are in the foundation itself. So it has to buckle. It has to buckle. And I think when that happens, I think women will have their foundation sturdy enough that they can help pick us up and get us in the right accordance. Metaphorically,
I see that happen a lot now, and so I feel like that buckling is already in the process of happening, and I see that upliftment not only just coming from women, but also the transgender community. And I think the queer communities have a lot to do with that upliftment as well. Because I know a lot of the wisdom that I carry in terms of my relationship to what it means to be a man comes from like trans and queer philosophies and schools of thought, and just like and understandings of the world that I've gotten from them. Similarly to my understanding of my whiteness comes a lot from the consciousness of the Black community. And a lot of the upliftment of white people out of whiteness has been all the Black community, and just different communities of color, indigenous communities. So I see a lot of that. I see that buckling happening now in terms of like the men that are in power, and the ways in which that we're being uplifted from that. And similarly, like what we're saying about like how men, like super masculine men that aren't attracted to, you know, men's work or healing or anything like that, it's that feminine energy that's helping us.
Yeah, we ain't gonna do it on our own.
No.
We're not structured to. We come from them, right? Yeah, from whence we shall return, in a sense. Even though, you know, the establishment would like you to think otherwise, you know, that women came from our rib, and which is a misinterpretation. You know, that scripture actually speaks more of it being an equal versus like you are from me, you know. Yeah, it's more of a balance. One way or another, though, we're gonna have to come into ourselves. I think it'll be in our lifetime. At least, I think the culmination of things will crumble enough so that in our lifetime we have to see the regeneration of it.
I like to think about it as like there is only one lifetime. Because when I think about the mission, even the mission that you have, the mission that I'm on, for me, the mission has to be bigger than my lifetime. There's definitely things that I like with the Achilles community. Like I want to see certain things happen as much as I can with my personal mission. But if I put too much weight into my lifetime, that feeds into way too much of my own anxiousness and ego and a bunch of other shit. So I know for myself, the mission I see as, like you were saying, it's gonna happen. And it's just a matter of us being in the flow of that.
I think you pick up friends along the way that help, you know, carry you with the flow, and some of them are oasis for you, little islands for you to gather yourself, learn from, get what you need, and get to the next point.
And honestly, like that's why I'm so grateful for meeting you and for, you know, crossing paths and being able to connect with you all this time. And even if it's well, like only a couple times a year for the past few years, because I've when I met you and not just what you were saying before is so true. Like you carry you're an obvious embodiment of what you do. Like you're like the gong bath is just an extension of who you are, and like the way that you're walking, the way that you're about. And so like that metaphor that you're using is a perfect description of your presence in my life, which I'm really grateful for.
That's everything. It's nice to know that, you know, you touch other people, you know. That's one of the reasons why I pursue it, and you want to make a difference in someone else's life, And I think the small things add up. You never know where someone is at any given point, what they're going through, and how what you say or do or how you play that day can, you know, really help support someone or fill in their voids or bring a connection to them or a relationship with sound in a way that they've never were able to, experience.
And that's why what you said to me that day was so profound to me, because it like completely, I didn't know that I had a choice. I didn't know that I could not hate listening to a screeching train or the cars honking. And I remember you said also like listening to the engine of a car, how like it's on, and then for me that became listening to the purr of a cat or like the growl of a dog or the voice of a person, and it just there are just so many layers to it that ultimately affect my health, my everyday life.
Cat's purr is divine.
It really is. Absolutely. Do you consider yourself a master?
No.
No. How do you relate to when people call you a master? Like a master gong practitioner?
So my teacher taught us that we're all gong masters striving to be masters. To master oneself and to take that on, you have to see yourself as, to develop into that. And I think that's where that comes from, kind of setting the intent to be and crafting yourself towards is how you'll become. And that's how you develop self-mastery. We are all metaphorically gongs, and what we apply to ourselves, how you feed the gong, you get back in return. And if you give too much, the sound can't fully expand upon itself. So sometimes less is more. With one strike, there's a more developed enveloping of the sound versus sometimes the consistency. You might cut the next thing off before it fully expands. You jumped in it too quickly. And so I think you got to give yourself space,
I ask because I've heard a bunch of people through the yoga world, through sound bath world. Like I've heard a decent amount of both sound baths or sound healers and things like that. But honestly, like there's no one that compares to how you do it in terms from my experience. And that's why intuitively, in my mind, and whenever I speak about you to people, I always describe you as a master gong practitioner, because I can feel how deep you're in it and how intuitively you're in it, where you're playing it differently than just somebody playing an instrument or hitting or rubbing or there's a completely different relationship that's present, that I can sense and that I can feel from you while you're in it than from other people.
It's so intuitive for me now, and it's so much about feeling. Feeling the gong out, feeling the sounds out. It really does come from a heart space with me. I really play to my heart. I don't know how to describe that. I just don't really. But the purr of the gong, I could feel that thing, and I just feed into it, and I let off, and I feed into it. A lot of times I cry when I play just because that feeling it feels so good. But when I can see others raptured in it and they look like they don't want to get up, I look at my wife and I just like, we got him. We do that all the time while we're playing,
Beautiful.
Yeah. Master is a funny word. I like that word adept, you know?
What?
Adept.
Okay.
Yeah, it gives room, I feel. It says that you're, you know...
Is it different than student in terms of like the meaning or etymology of it?
It says that you're proficient enough to do the do, you know, that you know enough to do it and that you're good at it enough to be doing the work, you know. But it doesn't, like, master caps it off, I feel like. It's just like, you're already there. And that is like room to move up and maybe even to fall back a little bit, you know.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like
I had that on a flyer recently, and it was the first time I put that. I did a sound bath with 2 other practitioners, a male and a female. I've been playing both longer than both of them. One is older than me, I believe, and the other is younger. And they both look up to me and respect my playing, and it was an honor for them to play with me, having more experience. But they asked me to join them, and on the original bio that Golden Drum had, it said sound masters or gong masters or whatever. And I copied and pasted everything, but I changed that one word. I just couldn't put it up on my page. It didn't, it sounded more egotistic to me. And for some people, you know, these titles are everything, you know. And I don't know. The other thing is I'm trying to appeal to people that can't really relate to this, and I think master throws that off. That's tone. It's master. That's tone from Building 64. What are you talking about? Like, so I'm trying to I stopped wearing a lot of like the spiritual garbs and things sometimes, some of the yogi wear, because I felt like it was locking me into something. And what that was doing was helping me to be more upright and to live more in accordance, putting that on. It was like, you know, you put this on and I felt more the part, and it helped to keep me in line. But I felt like it was sending the wrong idea too, because people that were already in that were assuming that I was full-fledged that. And I never devoted to anything as such. You know, I kind of like to put my foot in and take it out and have that freedom, you know, and apply different things from different cultures. But I'm still an urbanite in a sense. And so I'm trying to find the medium ground, you know, a little of this with a little of that. Yeah. That feels true, but can still like give me a universal appeal. Yeah. It's still a student.
Always.
Master is so hard. But I like the respect that master invokes in a sense, you know. When somebody else calls you that, and you know, it's a term of respect, I feel, and
yeah, and I think in that way, even the word respect for me, like etymologically, it means to see, you know, to see something, to see it again, and in that way, to see somebody as master is you giving them that respect. You see them in a higher regard, that you see their value, or you see something about them that you hold up. Yeah. So, but it's hard to not let the ego feed into that at that point.
The ego is something else. It's very I don't want to say sneaky, but it's elusive also. You know, it plays such a part. It goes right past you. You don't even unless you know, and sometimes it's still hard to see it for what it is, you know. It's a very powerful enabler, and ego can giveth and taketh. You know, it's up there. It's up there, man.
Well, Sunseed, thank you.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate you, brother.
This was a pleasure.